Welcome to United Taste of America. Today we're in the Commonwealth of Virginia at a beautiful site on the Potomac River, home of George Washington, Mount Vernon. Virginia was one of the 13 original colonies, named for Queen Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen. And Virginia later became the 10th state in the Union. Virginia has played such a great role in the history of our country, but it also has a rich culinary history with things that you know about, like Virginia ham. But did you know that they grow and harvest a lot of great peanuts in Virginia? Today we're going to talk about one of the most iconic dishes in America, Virginia peanut soup, here at Mount Vernon. I'm with Doug Bradburn, President and CEO of George Washington's Mount Vernon. Thanks for having us today.
We're delighted you're here. It's a beautiful day in June, and we love it.
Well, let me ask you this. How does it feel to get up every day and go to work at one of the most iconic, beautiful, and historic places in all of America?
Well, I have to pinch myself every day because you have this extraordinary historic site that's been important to Americans since the very beginning of our story. And then at the same time, I've just got gorgeous gardens, and I've got views, and it really is a wonderful place to work.
Well, so many of the great places in America start with the land. Mm-hmm. Yeah. He had a good eye for land because that view of the Potomac is pretty special.
He said that this place was the most pleasantly situated in all of the United States.
I like that term, pleasantly situated.
Absolutely. He loved that term. He was a surveyor as a young boy, as you know, so he definitely knew the land. And he was his own landscape architect as well as his own architect of the building structures here. But he was very aware of vistas and views. And so when you're here at Mount Vernon, you're inside his head. You're seeing what he wanted you to see.
Well, it's interesting. Here we have the Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army who becomes the first president of the United States. But he's really the history of America and the American dream. He was a self-made man.
That's a great point. He was self-educated. His father died when he's 11 years old. So he only has formal education. They bring him reading, writing, arithmetic. And after that, the family doesn't have any money. And so everything else he has to do on his own. And he becomes a surveyor making money by the age of 17. And one of the great things we have at Mount Vernon, we have his library, and it's a library that he develops over a lifetime of curious reading, but a lifetime of action. So he's learning by doing and by buying books about that subject. So when he becomes a major farmer, he's buying books on agriculture. Military leader, he's buying books on military science. He adds to this his own education over time.
Well, he was gone so much. We have a joke that behind every successful man is a very surprised mother-in-law. And he obviously married really well, who kept this place going in all the years that he was away. Talk about her a little bit.
Well, Martha Washington, she was a widow, young widow when they married. They were the same age, 26. And she could choose anybody she wanted because she was the wealthiest woman in Virginia. And so she chose him. And he was very fortunate because she not only brought the wealth into his life in a way that he had never had access to, but they became really great life partners. They spent 40 years together, a deep relationship that becomes clear through the descriptions of their time here. But if you compare George Washington in the French and Indian War, when he's younger than 26 and he's 21 to 25, he's a tested war veteran, and he's developing some leadership chops, but he's a very different man by the time he's the Commander-in-Chief of the American Army. And Martha has a lot to do with that. She brings a lot of self-confidence to him in a critical way. And one thing about him being gone here, and she's managing things, she also herself, during the American Revolutionary War, she goes and visits the troops every winter and puts herself at risk in the middle of war zones to go and be with him during the winter months. And so it was a great partnership.
Well, one of the jokes in America, if George Washington really slept everywhere they said he slept, then he was never at home, but he did sleep here.
He did. He did sleep here. This was the place he wanted to sleep. This was his home, the place he pined for. I mean, even in the Revolution, he would write letters constantly to his farm managers here to just find out what's going on. Have you put in the new trees I've asked you to put in? Have you fixed the house in this way? He was obsessed with the place, and he wanted to be here. And it clearly was his, it was a place that he felt most at peace.
Well, it's interesting when you look back at our history. I mean, he could have been king if he had chosen to do that. But I think this place and the desire to be called home, to come home, made it not necessarily easy, but easier to say, no, I've served my 8 years. I'm going home.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, that choice to come back to Mount Vernon was surprising, or all over the world. The King of England said if George Washington becomes a private citizen after the United States secures their independency, he'll be the most famous man in the world. And of course, he did that. He gave back his commission, came back to Mount Vernon. Ironically, it gave him peace to be back here, but it also made Mount Vernon as famous as him, because you can't have Cincinnatus without the farm. And so this was the first origin story of America. Like when people said, what makes America different? Well, our great leader stepped away from power and went back to Mount Vernon. And so people would flock here to see him, to see this living legend. And so he might have wanted peace in retirement, but it never really came to him.
Well, this place was one of the first of our great historic places to be preserved. Right. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, that's a great story because, as I mentioned, Mount Vernon, was famous, but it was still in family hands. His descendants owned Mount Vernon, and they couldn't keep it up in the 19th century. And so they tried to sell it to the United States government. They tried to sell it to the Commonwealth of Virginia. This is the 1850s, so there was no example of a national park yet or anything like that. And so they didn't know what to do with it. And there was this group of women that came together, led by a woman named Anne Pamela Cunningham, who said, if the men of America won't save the father of their country's home, then the women shall. And they did. They formed a private corporation, the purpose of which was to purchase Mount Vernon for the public. And so the public can come here as a public history site. And they took possession and made it open for tourists on February 22nd, 1860. So that's before the Civil War.
Wow.
It's the oldest historic site in the country. Still managed by the same board of women. It's unbelievable. It's completely private. And we welcome now about 1 million visitors a year to this place, and it's been going strong since 1860.
Well, I've said that if I was ever elected president of the United States, the one cabinet member I would add is a historian. No. Because we learn so much from history, and you're in a position here, I've watched today at all these school groups that have come through, you're in a place that can teach our values. What does America stand for, and how do we create those values from the get-go with George Washington's leadership?
It's the most critical thing we need to teach in a country that's based on principles embedded in documents from the story of our origins, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution. George Washington lived for these. He lived to make sure these things could be passed on. And embedded in those are the values that we share as Americans. The stories we tell, the parables of our national birth, are critical to help people understand what they share in this country. Across party, in a time when we're polarized all the time and everybody's at each other's throats, we all believe in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And we have a responsibility as citizens to teach those stories, to hand it on. George Washington called our system of government a great experiment. This idea that could you create a self-ruling nation that didn't need divinely elected kings to govern you? Can people govern themselves? And he wasn't sure. He called it an experiment, and we're probably still not sure. Yeah. We're going to hand this off to the next generation.
Yeah, we do. But you can't hand it off to a new generation unless they understand the values of the old generation. That's right. And that's what y'all do here, probably, better than anybody. Well, we're about to have our 250th birthday of America. You're doing a big renovation here of this facility, hopeful to open in time for our semi-quincentennial. Talk a little bit about that process.
Well, this place, as I said, has been preserved as a place since 1860, but this is the largest preservation project we've ever undertaken on the mansion house itself, this iconic home that we need to survive for generations to come. And to do that, we've got to replace the foundation, shore it up, fix the carpentry, fix a lot of the masonry. We're putting in a whole new HVAC system to make sure it won't continue to deteriorate and can be supported for 1 million people tromping through it every year. So that our great-grandkids can experience it in the same way that you and I have been able to experience it. That is our goal, and it is our birthday gift to the nation because it has received no taxpayer dollars to do this incredible project and this work. And I hope everybody comes and takes a look at it, because not only that, but we've got brand new educational exhibit. We're going to have a brand new food court. It's a wonderful experience for anybody who comes to the area.
Well, speaking of food, this series is about United Taste of America. It's about our unique culinary, what I call the culinary gumbo of America. Y'all recently discovered something on this property where you found a cache of bottles of cherries, right? And other fruit that had been grown here that no one knew about.
It's an extraordinary story because we're doing this major preservation work in the mansion. We do archaeology to clear all the areas in the cellar underneath the mansion. And lo and behold, we lift up some of these paving stones that were put there in 1775, so over 250 years ago right now. And underneath there, we discovered around 30 bottles, intact, filled with cherries, gooseberries, currants. And it's your old grandmother's preservation. I mean, this was harvested cherries, harvested dry, put in old bottles and buried underneath the ground, so you would then be able to have fresh cherries for wintertime. And of course, these were forgotten. And I think they were honestly forgotten because it was 250 years ago in 1775 when George Washington went off to war. So a lot of changes in the household. The whole cellar was paved. And
People forgot they had buried stuff
forgot where
there.
they were.
That's wild.
And so it was extraordinary because in archaeology, despite what you might see in the movies, you don't find anything intact. It's always broken, and these were intact. And when the archaeologists uncovered them, the scent of cherries just was in the air. And we've been working with the USDA, and they say that these cherries are still food grade edible. Isn't that unbelievable?
That's unbelievable.
We shouldn't eat those today.
But did you know that they grew cherries here?
Well, we knew he had cherries grown here, but we didn't know about this preservation technique until we discovered it. And then you do some research and you discover that Martha Washington brought this technique up from the Williamsburg area. And one of her enslaved women, Doll was her name, was known as an expert in this technique, because we know that because Martha wrote about, Doll knows about the preservation of the cherries, and asked her to do that, And so it's an extraordinary story. We're always finding new things here. It's remarkable. It's such an old place. We still have new stories to tell.
Well, it's interesting how the legend of George Washington comes full circle from I chopped down the cherry tree to I actually had cherries and I actually preserved cherries.
Absolutely
so
right.
It's pretty good. Well, we're here to talk about an iconic Virginia dish, which is Virginia peanut soup. And we have some of that here in front of us. And we're going to spend a little time today with your chef and talk about exactly how that's made. But I can't thank you enough for having us here today at Mount Vernon.
Well, bon appetit. I know you're going to enjoy this extraordinary soup, which has been a part of the texture of Virginia for a very long time.
That's great. Well, let's have a little bit, okay? Thank you.
Let's do it.
Peanut soup originated in West Africa, but I have never found peanut soup anywhere outside of Virginia in the United States, and I don't know why, since it's really delicious and easy to make. It was originally made from a combination of both boiled and roasted peanuts, but now is easily made using peanut butter, which is so appropriate here at Mount Vernon since peanut butter was invented by a former enslaved man named George Washington Carver. You make peanut soup by sauteing chopped onions and celery in melted butter for 5 minutes. Then you add a small amount of flour to make a roux and stir for 1 minute. You then add the chicken broth and bring it to a boil, and then remove it completely from the heat before pureeing the soup to make it smooth. You then add peanut butter and heavy cream and warm again. You serve it in a bowl with a garnish of chopped roasted peanuts on top. It's simply amazing. Well, that's a wrap from the Commonwealth of Virginia at one of the most historic places in America, Mount Vernon. We'll see you next time on United Taste of America.